Hi, I'm Helen Bauer, and this is the Heart of Hospice Podcast. The Heart of Hospice Podcast is your source for compassionate and informative discussions about hospice and end-of-life care. I'm a certified hospice and palliative care nurse with over 15 years of experience. Whether you're a caregiver, someone with a serious illness, or you simply need to know more about hospice care, this podcast is for you. Join me as we explore all the aspects of hospice, from the details of caregiving to the emotional and spiritual dimensions of end-of-life journeys. For more resources and to connect with me, visit theheartofhospice.com and find us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Keep listening for today's episode.
This is the Whole Care Network. Helping you tell your story one podcast at a time. Content presented in the following podcast is for information purposes only. Views and opinions expressed in this podcast are solely those of the host and guest and may not represent the views and opinions of the Whole Care Network. Always consult with your physician for any medical advice, and always consult with your attorney for any legal advice. And thank you for listening to the Whole Care Network.
This episode of the Heart of Hospice Podcast is being brought to you by GrandPad. This holiday season, give the gift of connection with GrandPad. GrandPad is the all-in-one tablet designed specifically for seniors. This Christmas, give the gift that keeps on giving, a world where no senior feels lonely or isolated. GrandPad is more than a gift, it's a gateway to cherished family memories. To learn more about GrandPad, visit grandpad.net/THOH. GrandPad, bringing families together.
I'm talking with Death Doula Kacie today about her work as a death doula and how she's guiding future death doulas to make a lasting impact. My guest today is Gikonyo. She's an RN, a death doula, and the founder of Death Doula School. Their mission is to transform the way we approach end-of-life care. She believes in fostering collaboration over competition and nurturing a community-driven model through the Death Doula Collective. She has over a decade of experience in both traditional healthcare and death care, and she's dedicated to changing the narrative around death. Her approach blends compassionate education with a vision for reshaping end-of-life support. Kacie's website is deathdoulakacie.com, and Kacie is Kacie. You can also find her as at Death Doula Kacie on Facebook and all the other social media platforms. Her email is Kacie, Kacie, at Death Doula Kacie. Kacie is going to be talking with me about how she became an end-of-life doula as a nurse after working in nursing and how it helped her find meaning after the COVID pandemic. She also shared with me that as a death doula, she has a lot more freedom to serve her clients in ways that she wasn't able to as a nurse. And one of her specialties that she discusses is helping people create legacy projects. She shares stories of creating legacy projects with younger clients, with younger children, and also older clients that have adult children. This is going to be a great conversation, so stay with me and get to know Death Doula Kacie. There's a lot to learn. Kacie, welcome to the Heart of Hospice Podcast. I'm so glad to talk with you.
Yes, I'm so glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
I'm looking forward to this. I love talking to end-of-life doulas and death doulas because we speak the same language for sure.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, we're going to start out with an icebreaker question just to get to know you a little bit. And it's coming from the end-of-life deck.
I love the end of life deck.
Yes, wonderful conversation starter. So here's the question that I chose for you. In my final days, my family should err on the side of A, Over medicating, let me ride off into the sunset on a magical unicorn. B, moderation, I want to say my goodbyes but not be in pain. Or C, caution, minimal medication because I want to be as present as possible.
Great choice in card, first of all. My answer is I love the magical unicorn one. I always tell my family and friends and anybody else who's listening, I always say to send me out flying high for sure. I have no interest in suffering or experiencing pain or discomfort or anything else at the end of life. And so I am interested in absolutely everything hospice has to offer me. So everybody write that down.
Yeah, that's your advanced care planning.
Absolutely.
You can put that in your documentation, that the Heart of Hospice podcast, that's where you can find Kacie's advanced care plan. I tell my kids that sometimes too. The problem with my advanced care plan conversations that I share on the podcast is I have over 530 episodes.
They'd be searching. They'd really be searching.
It would be a whole lot better if I just write it down, I think. Yeah. So you're also a nurse as well as an end-of-life doula, a death doula, which is an amazing combination because it brings together some really great skills. How did you move from nursing? And it's my understanding you didn't do any hospice nursing, but how did you move from the nursing that you were doing into doula work?
Yeah, good question. So I am a nurse. I'm a registered nurse, and that is true. I am not a hospice nurse. I've never actually worked for hospice. I worked in the long-term care, skilled care, memory care realm for my entire nursing career. I love nursing. I love learning about the body and the mechanics and the, body and its processes and medications and how they can help and all of that stuff. But for me, COVID really kind of did something to me and helped me to realize that I was meant to be somewhere else or be doing something else. So I was an infection control nurse during COVID. And so my job was to keep the infection out and, minimize the spread of infection, which I did to the best of my ability. However, COVID was COVID. So, it got in and it spread like it did. But, during that time, I became hyper-focused on the fact that there were patients in the long-term care facility that I was working at that were dying really, really terrible deaths. They were alone. They didn't get to say goodbye to their family members because nobody was allowed in. We couldn't get hospice services for them because people were dying so fast everywhere, not just in our facility, in facilities everywhere. And hospice, there wasn't enough hospice, they were doing the best they could, but, they couldn't get to everybody on time. And even within the nursing staff within our facility, there wasn't enough people to be within, with everybody. And so people were dying alone and scared, and it was tragic and terrible. And I was hyper-focused on trying to help these people die better. And everybody thought I was nuts. You're a nurse and this isn't what you're supposed to be doing. And this isn't what you're supposed to be focused on right now.
Right.
And they were right. And I knew that this isn't what I'm supposed to be focused on right now. I'm supposed to be doing something different, but it was all I could focus on was being with them and holding their hand without a glove on, which was not what a nurse should be doing. That's actually against every single absolute rule that I knew that every rule that I was telling everybody not to break, I was breaking myself. And so it was at that moment that I realized that maybe I'm not a nurse. Maybe this isn't what I'm supposed to be. Maybe I'm something else. And I didn't know what, because as a nurse, I had never heard of a death doula. So I didn't know in that moment, hey, I think I'm supposed to be a death doula instead. I just knew maybe this isn't exactly what I'm supposed to be. And I ended up getting laid off of my nursing job due to COVID. And I was okay with that because I felt like I needed to make a shift into something different. And so I just kind of did some research, started searching, how can I help people die better and differently? How can I do this? And in my research, I stumbled upon death doulas. And when I read what a death doula was, they help people to labor out of life. It was like a bomb went off in my brain. Like, that is it. That's the name. That's what I've been looking for. That's what I was doing all along. I was sitting in a nurse's costume, but that's what I was doing. And I love my nursing history and everything that I learned. And it led me straight to here, which is perfect. But this is where I'm supposed to be, and this is what I'm supposed to be doing. And I just know that absolutely, like, this is my calling. And as soon as I found that name, it was like, I have to do this. I have to find this training. And I mean, I took training immediately. I signed up for it. I was trained through an ELDA. So I signed up for like their next course. So I had to wait a couple months until their next course started. But the second I finished the course and then got certified, I opened my business and just kind of ran with it from there. So that's kind of how that happened. It was just a very quick, like, this is what I have to do. And as soon as I found the name and the title, it was like a no-brainer. Like, this is where I have to go with this.
And it wasn't like, this is what I want to be when I grow up. It's like, this is what I'm doing now. This is who I am.
Yeah, it was like, this is who I am. This is who I've been. I've already been this person. Like, now I have to just name it. I have to give it that name. I have to do that.
Yeah. I think a lot of end-of-life workers have that sort of light bulb moment that this is what they want to do. So I will have to tell you that I've been a hospice nurse for 15 years, and I don't think it's been, I probably haven't known about death doulas for, I don't know, 6 years, maybe 7 years. And I feel like that the doula movement is really growing. What would you say about that?
Definitely. It is absolutely growing. I mean, even in the last 2 or 3 years, I mean, it is growing monumentally. When I started my business in 2022, in my area here in Cleveland, there was nobody else. And so I started networking and making this huge splash in my area. And now, I mean, there's 15 to 20 doulas in my area, and the majority of them are doulas because they met me and they were like, oh my gosh, like, that's amazing. I want to do that too. And half of them ended up going to my school, to my training school. So half of them I've actually trained. And the other half went to different schools before my school opened. So it's just kind of wild how quickly it's growing. And, it is very fast, becoming an upward trend.
I think so. So you've worked in some very different silos from the end of life work that you're doing as a death doula. What would you say are the biggest differences that you notice in the care that you were providing before and what you're doing as a death doula now?
I have, as a death doula, I mean, obviously the biggest difference is that this is non-medical. So,
right.
That's a huge glaring difference. But aside from that big one, I have so much more freedom as a death doula to provide patient-centered care. You hear that term a lot, in the hospital or, in long-term care facilities or whatever. When you're a nurse, you hear that word a lot, patient-centered care, but I think it's just a word that gets thrown around a lot.
I think it's something we like to say. Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Because it sounds good.
Yes, exactly. But I mean, here I can take my client to the park if that's what feels great for her,
Yeah.
So, I mean, literally, like, our appointments can look like absolutely anything that they need to look like. They can be over Zoom if that's what feels good today. They can be a phone call if that's what feels good today. If you're like, I feel ugly and I don't want anyone looking at me, like, forget it. Let's just talk on the phone. Or if you're like, I feel amazing, let's go outside. It's a beautiful day. Can you take me to the park? Absolutely. I'm going to pick you up and I'm going to take you straight to the park. Or if I had a client who was dying to go to like a pumpkin farm over fall, so like, and had no one to take her, like, sweet, let's do it. So I took her to the pumpkin farm. I've had clients who want to go to the dispensary, and that's legal here in my state. So absolutely, I'll pick you up and take you there. I just have the freedom to do whatever is right for my clients, and whatever's best for them. And so that's really cool to be able to offer patient-centered care. And then also, even as far as my services and what they look like, it never looks the same for two people. It never does. Even as far as how often we work together, or when we work together, or where we work together, or how we work together, or who's involved, it's just always different based on your diagnosis and your situation and your family and what's best for you. And I love that about it. It doesn't ever have to look the same. There's never like one, here's what I do and this is what it looks like. It's just always very tailored to your situation.
So to me, what I hear you saying is in nursing, and remember, I'm ragging on my own people because I work in nursing too, that's patient-centered care, when what you're able to do as a death doula is person-centered.
Yeah, I do like the way you said that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a big difference. It doesn't sound like much, but it absolutely is, because personhood, taking care of a person versus taking care of a patient. Patient is a label, and it's based on the fact that you have become ill or you have a diagnosis or a disease and you need treatment. That's a patient. A person is simply a human being, as we all are.
Right.
Yeah, that's what that says to me.
That's almost beautiful the way you said that. I like that.
I know that with the heavy burden we have of regulation, right?
Yeah.
Rules, regulations, policies in nursing, doulas are poised at a special place because they are not licensed. For my listeners that don't know this, end-of-life doulas and death doulas are not licensed. They're not regulated by the state or the federal government. Most of them work independently. They have their quote-unquote private practice. They have their own independent business, which comes with its own challenges. But there's a certain amount of flexibility that nurses don't have, hospice nurses don't have, that doulas have.
For sure. And also the availability to never be burnt out is really a big thing for me too. Like I get to manage my caseload and what that looks like and how many patients I have or clients I have, so that I am never, feeling overwhelmed or like I have too much, or, like I'm doing too much, or like it's infringing on my life, like I can't do things with my kids, or, like I don't have time for things that I love. That's really great to be able to do that, to be able to really manage your schedule in such a way.
Yeah, there's some perks to it. Of course, on the flip side, you're also running a small business.
Yeah.
Yeah, and making money as a doula, doing doula work is not an easy thing from what I hear.
Totally not. Definitely not. It takes a lot of hard work to be able to get where I'm at.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. You're the CEO, the chief everything officer. You're the marketer, Yeah. Yeah, you're doing it, all of it. So, Kacie, what are you offering as a doula that you couldn't or you don't as a nurse? What's sort of your specialty? Because a lot of doulas have their own little niche that they work inside of, advanced care planning or grief and bereavement. What's your specialty, sort of?
Definitely. I think my specialty is I work with people who are younger, who've kind of gotten a terminal diagnosis. Usually it's cancer, but it doesn't have to be cancer. That's just kind of who really finds me. But my niche, my specialty is that my clients are usually younger. So they're in their 30s, their 40s, their 50s, maybe their 60s, but there's a lot of stuff going on, a lot of complications. They have children, there's, a husband, a wife, a spouse, there's pets, there's a house, there's a lot of complications involved. So it's not somebody who's maybe at the end of their life age-wise. So that's kind of my specialty, where I can come into the picture and help with all of that, help the dying individual kind of sort through all of that, the terminal diagnosis, understanding it, what the future may look like, the planning, making sure all of the planning is in place. I'm really passionate about that because I know that things can go so easy if everything is done. I mean, not easy, but easier if everything is in place.
Right.
Whereas things can just be such an absolute disaster if nothing is in place. And so I'm just so passionate about making sure, like, if we can just check all of these boxes, we can avoid so much chaos. So let's just do it. Like, let's just hurry up and check all these boxes really quick and get all of that out of the way so that we know for a fact we don't have to have any of these chaotic moments anywhere in the future.
Right.
But then I also like to help them, deal with the fact that they're going to be leaving behind children, small children, a lot of the times, or, a spouse who's going to have to take care of those small children. And I like to help with legacy projects for said children and the spouse and things like that. These situations are extra sensitive and extra tender. And I just think that that's kind of where I shine, not only in helping the dying individual, but then also helping to support those loved ones, because that's really difficult for all of them too, helping these children who are going to lose their mother, their father, their sister, whoever it is that they're going to lose. And the same thing with the spouse. A lot of times when you have a spouse who's losing a younger spouse, and then there's children being left behind, all of this is just very complicated and confusing. And it sounds kind of crazy, but even when there's pets involved too, it just kind of throws another little complication and confusion into the mix. And something else, I love to be there to make sure that the fur babies are getting love too, and attention and care, and let's involve them so that they understand what's going on too, like they're part of the family. So anyways, that's kind of my niche. That's where I shine, is when people have a terminal diagnosis at a younger age. What I do differently as a doula that I couldn't do as a nurse, I think I just provide a lot more emotional support. Because I have a lot more time, you're just a little bit more free,
For sure.
more free to do that. And it's just because you get to be with like one or two people, instead of having all of these people.
Right.
You get to really kind of devote your time to one or two people. And I think that's so important, rather than having to juggle, several different people. I think that that's kind of the big difference for me in nursing and being a doula. And I make myself available to everybody, to the whole family. And I'm available to them 24/7 via like text, email, phone call. I'm not like on call running out there 24/7. That's unreasonable. But I am available to the whole family. So, whenever anybody's scared or confused or nervous or doesn't know what to do or is having a breakdown or just needs somebody to talk to, I'm kind of there for everybody. So again, that's kind of where it's a little bit different than nursing as well.
Absolutely. It sounds like a much more intimate relationship with your clients and their families. So I want to touch on something you said, because I think it's really important, and I want to take a deeper dive into it. You said that you work with your clients to create legacy projects.
Yeah.
So tell my listeners what legacy projects are and what type of projects you are doing with your clients.
Definitely. So a legacy project, they say that each person dies 2 deaths, once when you physically die and once again when you're spoken of for the last time. So what type of legacy would you like to leave behind for those that you're leaving behind? So I love to help my clients create something physical and tangible that they can leave behind for those people that they're leaving behind, their loved ones. And like I mentioned, a lot of times my clients are younger, so they're leaving behind some children or a wife or a sister or a husband, people that are of importance. So we work on some pretty serious projects. I can give you some examples of some. I had a client who was a mother in her 40s, and she was leaving behind a daughter who was 11, I think she was. But obviously, the mother was, upset that she was going to miss some pretty significant moments in this daughter's life. She was going to miss her 16th birthday, her graduation, her 18th birthday, her wedding day when she has her first child, these monumental moments. So I gathered greeting cards for any possible thing that you could ever imagine. And she filled them out with just these heartfelt, mom love notes in every single thing, for every type of moment you could ever imagine, every single number, birthday, get well cards for when she's sick, just anything you could ever think of. And the dad has this little box full of them. And, anytime any type of event happens or whatever, he's got these cards from the mom that he can give to the daughter so that she has these little cards from her mom. So it's like, in a way, her mom is there too, even though she's not really there. I had another client who was a poet. She was actually a professor here at Cleveland State University. And she also had some poetry that was published in some books or whatever. But she had battled with cancer for some years. And this was also during COVID. So she had been sick for probably like 2 or 3 years. She hadn't been able to do her poetry. But in her last couple months of life, she told me that she could hear her poems in her head again. So I was like, well, we got to get them out of there. You haven't been writing your poems down for like years. We can't just let them bounce around in your head. We got to get them out of there. But she was too weak. She couldn't document them herself. So I recorded, she just would speak them out loud and I would record them. But in me recording them, I realized that they were all about her children. She had an adult son and an adult daughter. So I'm like, let's make these into a book, like one book for your son and one book for your daughter. So we made them into these like hardbound books, but she wanted to make them like an actual book. So we made them real fancy with like a note from the author and like a biography page,
Wow.
It would be like a book you would find in the library. And the kids had no idea that we were doing them. So then when she died, I went to the funeral and I gave the books to the kids. They were wrapped up and told them, don't open these until you get home because you'll ugly cry for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
So yeah, for sure. And they were just like amazed because they had no idea that she was doing her poetry again. So like, it was really cool for them. Not only did they get this thing from her, but it was her poetry and they had no idea she was doing that. So, legacy projects, just really, really cool. Nobody they're the type of thing where I had never heard of a legacy project until I went to Death Doula training. And it's the type of thing for me where it's like, who doesn't want to do that? I wish I would have known of that sooner. I would have done it with my grandma who passed away previously. I feel like it's the type of thing that nobody thinks of, but everybody would do if they just would think of it. It's just something that nobody really thinks of because we don't like to think about death,
Well, in the United States, our form of death is very medicalized. People are in the hospital. But with something like a legacy project, you can look 100 different ways. I mean, this particular client you're talking about wrote poetry, but it could be anything. It could be recorded stories that someone tells from when they were a kid, all sorts of different things. So it's so personalized. I love that part of legacy projects. It can really look like whatever the patient wants it to look like.
It can. I had one patient was into like plants. She loved plants. And so she had a plant for each of the grandchildren and each of the children. And so one plant got passed down to each of the kids, and one of the other clients, he was a gardener. And so the garden got passed down as the legacy, I mean, how cool is that? So, I mean, it really can be anything. It could be a book. It could be a quilt. It could be a garden,
Yeah.
Oh, one that was really, really cool. I love this one. I had a client who was an art professor, and her family donated money to the Art Institute in her name for a scholarship each year. So each year there's a scholarship in her name. Like, how cool is that? There's a scholarship literally in her name each year. Like, what a great way to keep her name alive. I just thought that was really great.
Yeah, to remember her and then have it be something that was near and dear to her. I think that's very cool. Very cool. I hope you're enjoying this episode. We're going to pause for just a minute. My guest has more to share.
This episode of the Heart of Hospice Podcast is being brought to you by GrandPad. This holiday season, give the gift of connection with GrandPad, the perfect way to keep your older loved ones close, even when you're far apart. GrandPad is the all-in-one tablet designed specifically for seniors, making it easier than ever to share holiday cheer across generations. With secure, simple video calling and photo sharing, you can virtually join in on decorating the tree or watch as your little ones open their presents, no matter the distance. Spread joy throughout the year with GrandPad's user-friendly interface, allowing seniors to enjoy music, games, photos, as well as emails from family. No need to worry about Wi-Fi setup. GrandPad comes with 4G LTE cellular service included. This Christmas, give the gift that keeps on giving, a world where no senior feels lonely or isolated. With GrandPad, you're not just giving a device, you're giving the warmth of family connection. Make this holiday season unforgettable. To learn more about GrandPad, visit grandpad.net/THOH or call 1-888-904-4723 today to order your GrandPad. It's more than a gift, it's a gateway to cherished family moments. GrandPad, bringing families together.
Okay, so let's get personal.
Oh, man.
About your work. I know, right? So what is something about the end-of-life work that you're doing right now that you find challenging as an individual?
I mean, the hardest part about the end-of-life work is that people hate talking about death. And so part of my personal goal is to change the narrative around death and dying. And so I spend a lot of my time talking about death and educating about death. And, it's a real goal of mine to change the narrative about death and dying. So not only do I, work as a death doula, but I work really hard, in the death positive movement to really try to change that narrative. And so that's really kind of the biggest wall that I seem to face all the time is just trying to get people to really change that narrative and to listen and to understand that if we just talk about death and listen and get educated about it, that it can only make it better for us. People think that talking about death is bad and scary and terrible for us. But it's just the opposite, just learning about it can only make it better for us and our loved ones. If you understand death better, it will make it better for you yourself, but also for your loved ones, because you at some point will experience the death of a loved one. And if you understand that, it'll make it easier on yourself and easier on them too. So that's the hardest part about it, is really getting people to open up and talk about it. But honestly, when I started this whole thing, I really didn't think that anybody was going to be open to what I was doing. And way more people are open to it than I expected. So, while that is the hardest part, not as hard as I thought it was going to be.
Yeah, there are hundreds of end-of-life workers listening to this podcast, at least I hope it's hundreds, who are doing a fist pump and saying, yes, help us talk about this, the entire country. Yeah, the last interview I did, we were talking about death and end of life and mortality. And this is what I'll say. I've been a hospice nurse for 15 years. I talk about death and dying all the time. I'm still alive. I have not caused anything to happen yet. I'm mortal. I will have an endpoint just like every other human being. But talking about it for the last 15 years, and I mean incessantly talking about it, right? It hasn't caused anything to happen yet. So
actually, talking about it incessantly has caused me to live a more meaningful life. So, I mean, that's something else that I think is important for people to know too, is that if you really truly understand death and, grasp that your life on earth is finite and, take that in and stop avoiding that, you tend to live a more meaningful life. And so, for me, talking about death every single day and being around death all the time just helps me to be more grateful and thankful for every single second that I'm here. So, maybe that wouldn't help, that could help the general population too, to be a little bit more, grateful in their general life as well, to kind of be more exposed to the death positive movement.
yeah. Yeah, I think it does foster an attitude of gratefulness. I remember one of my kids saying when they were little, I wish it was Christmas every day. But I said, would it still be fun? It wouldn't be special like that. If you knew you had an infinite number of days, you never have to worry about them stopping. It would get boring. It wouldn't be any fun, and you wouldn't be grateful for it the way you are now.
Right.
So knowing that you have this gift of life, however long it's going to come to you, doesn't it at least deserve some reflective time to say, I don't want to waste this. This has been given to me, and I want to be grateful for every day and use it.
Yeah.
That's my hope anyway. So what is your favorite thing? This sounds like a crazy question now that I'm thinking it out loud, saying it out loud. What's your favorite thing about working with the dying?
My favorite thing.
That doesn't sound creepy at all, does it?
It doesn't to me, but I think other people listening might maybe think that, but not to me. It's even hard to narrow it down. I mean, part of it is that they're so grateful because they don't really have anybody else to unload all of these feelings onto in such a way that somebody understands,
Yeah.
And so a lot of times I always claim that I'm like the pillar of support, because people don't want to talk to their family members about how they're feeling because it could make them cry. It could make them feel uncomfortable,
Right. Make
so
people upset.
yeah, I don't want to talk to my, husband about the fact that I'm dying, or my kids or my mom or whoever, it's going to make them really upset. They're not going to like that. But I can talk to Kacie about it. She's not going to cry. She'll have a whole conversation with me about it, and that's okay. And so, they're always really just grateful to have me. And so that's a really good feeling. But, people always ask me how I deal with the heaviness and the grief of it. And to be honest, there's a great sense of accomplishment that comes with it as opposed to grief for me. And so that's a big part of it too. When I work with a client, I work with them for many, many months, and I get to know them for those months, and then I sit with them, as they labor out of life. And once they do finally leave and they are gone, there is this great sense of accomplishment. Like I helped you, like I did this, I know that you left here peacefully and you're gone and you're comfortable and everything is in order and your family's okay. And it's like that feeling that I get, I like that too, where it's just like, I did it. I helped you. Everything's okay.
Yeah.
So whatever that is that I get, that warm fuzzy.
It's meaning and purpose, and you feel like you did something important and that you made a difference. That sounds like a little Sesame Street, I guess, to say it that way. But I get that. As a hospice nurse, I feel like when I've helped somebody to manage all these complicated things that nobody wants to talk about, and I'm the person that'll talk about all these horrible things with you. You tell me what you want to talk about, and we'll talk about it. You walk out of there, and there's a sense of accomplishment in a very deep way for people who work with the dying. It's not like making a sale, It's it's not like getting a new client and a new account, working with numbers or money or things like that. It's just something, it's very different.
Very spiritual almost, right? Like it's a very like energy something. It's definitely something.
Yeah. And what I have always found is that in caring for these people that are dying and for their family caregivers, at the end of the day, I feel like I got way more out of it than I ever gave to them.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a very, very privileged place to be in, to work with the dying, at least in my point of view.
I agree. I always say I feel honored to be there. Like there's so many beautiful, intimate moments that happen at the end, and so many like beautiful things that you get to see happen between family members, right? Where they'll be like holding hands and crying and just saying these beautiful things. And I'll just be sitting there like, I can't believe that I'm watching this right now. Like, how do I get to be the one that gets to be here? Like,
I just get to, I get to witness. Yes.
Right. Like, how do I get to be the one that gets to see this? Like, it really is such an honor to be there. Yeah. And it's funny to me that people ask me that all the time. Like, how do you deal with that? How do you deal with the grief? And I always say I deal with the grief differently because I don't know, it doesn't feel so heavy for me. It just feels different. It feels so different to me.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it should be. It should be. We are not called as end-of-life workers to become part of the grieving family. If we have done that, then we've crossed a boundary that I think renders us ineffective. If you if you become one of the grieving family, you're no longer able to provide the care as a practitioner. That's the way it seems to me. It's the way it seems to me. But there are patients that get into your heart a little bit, and we do grieve those folks. But I think because we are once removed from what we are watching, the grief is different for us. It's a secondary grief, and I think that's what keeps it from being as heavy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. I'll agree.
Yeah. But it's still such a privilege. So I'm going to put you on the spot here with this. What is your current go-to healthy self-care habit?
Current go-to healthy self-care.
Notice I threw in healthy. Yeah, because we're not talking about the bag of Oreos on the couch with Netflix.
All right. No, I love outside. I'm really big into nature and getting outside and taking a walk and just I'm big into energy and letting nature kind of cleanse me of all of the negative energy. So that's kind of my big thing, is just getting outside. And I like to be around like nature. So here in Cleveland, we have the metro parks. So I always go to the metro parks where I'm surrounded by the trees and the water and the leaves and nature. So I'm not by like the cars and the roads and the houses, all of that stuff. And I just love to kind of be there. And I like to touch the trees and close my eyes and listen to the water. And I love to just walk too, because walking is really good for your body. Being in nature is really good for your body. So those are kind of my two go-to moves. I find it great for clearing my head. Great for anything really. I mean, it's really great to just kind of help with everything. Helps to keep my brain clear, helps to keep my body moving, helps to keep me feeling good. Those are my two biggest go-to self-care moves. And then after that is always kind of hanging out with my kids. So that's my third that I go to, is chilling with my boys.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's whole care, whole person care, mind, body, spirit. When we care for patients or clients like that and their caregivers like that, then we have to turn around and focus that on ourselves so we refill for the next one. So that's great. That's great care. So you have an organization that you started called Death Doula Collective. And it's a little bit different. There are a lot of doula schools and organizations for supporting doulas, but you're offering continuing education for doulas, aren't you, through the collective?
So the Death Doula Collective is actually a networking group for Death Doulas. I have the Death Doula School, which is a Death Doula training program that trains Death Doulas. So there's two different things we got there. So Death Doula School is a training certification program. So if you want to become a Death Doula, you can go to Death Doula School. If you already are a Death Doula, but you're just looking for support, that's what the Death Doula Collective is. The Death Doula Collective actually started first. And the reason for that is because there weren't a ton of Death Doulas out there initially. Now there kind of are more. But when I first started, I was kind of all alone here on this island by myself initially, and I was just looking for a little bit more support. So I had started reaching out to Death Doulas everywhere that I could find. And I ended up finding Death Doulas all over the country that were a lot like myself. They were just kind of like, hey, I'm all alone too, and I need support too. You know, they just didn't really know anything either. So I had ended up kind of making all of these like one-on-one connections with people. And I was like, why don't we just start this huge group instead of me having these one-on-one connections? Like, why don't we just all do this together? So I started this big networking group for Death Doulas. So we've been open for about a year and a half now. We meet twice a month and we do, the goal is to like empower and support Death Doulas as we grow our business. So we have guest speakers that come in and kind of, you know, teach us things that help us grow our business, like, you know, how to improve your SEO or how to build a website or how to do marketing or how to improve your message, elevator pitch, you know, just random things like that that you need to know about building a business. And sometimes we'll just have meetings where we talk about things that are hot topics in the news or, you know, difficult clients that we're working with, or even wonderful clients that we're working with. Like, hey, I have this great story I have to tell you guys about, you know, or things we've been struggling with business-wise, whatever. So that's kind of what the Death Doula Collective is. Right now, there's about 25 members, I believe, in the collective. So that's what the collective is.
Interesting. That's wonderful to hear that. Starting out a movement, if that's the right word, but all these end-of-life workers doing this, you need a place where you can get support. I mean, other hospice disciplines have it. Nurses, social workers, chaplains, there are all sorts of organizations that provide support and continuing education and places to go and troubleshoot clients. So the collective is a great idea. Tell me about the Death Doula School that you're running.
Yeah, so Death Doula School is an online training program for those who want to become a death doula. So it is about 40 hours of curriculum, and it's taught mostly by myself, but not just by me. So there is education from myself, but also a lot of other leaders in the end-of-life realm. So my goal with Death Doula School was not to teach people just what is a death doula. My goal was to make very well-rounded, successful death doulas. I think it's important for a death doula to know everything that's going on in the end-of-life realm, not just what is a death doula, because that's, you know, there's a lot of things. You need to know what is hospice and how do we work along with hospice and how do we not cross a boundary with hospice and how can we pass referrals back and forth with hospice. Death doulas need to understand the medical aspects of death and dying. So, you know, if you hear the death rattle, you need to know what that is. What does that sound like? So that you're not like terrified of it, you know, because it's very scary if you've never heard that before. If your patient is experiencing terminal agitation, you should understand what that looks like. So again, you're not terrified by that. Right. But also so that you can maybe say to the family, I think hospice could probably support us through this. Why don't you go ahead and give them a call? Because a lot of times the family just doesn't know what to do. Terminal lucidity. I love for death doulas to know what that is so that they can educate the family before it happens. Because what a beautiful, magical moment terminal lucidity is if you understand it before it happens. Most people will just waste it if they don't understand it before it happens because they're like, oh, she's all better now. Everything's great, you know?
Right.
I teach a lot about pressure ulcers and how to prevent them, because why wouldn't death doulas help prevent pressure ulcers if they're sitting there spending time with them? Why not throw another hand in there to help prevent pressure ulcers? I teach just about, what is long-term care, skilled care, memory care, because these things could come up. If you have a client with Alzheimer's who is no longer safe in the home, then your client might need, or your client's, family might need help guiding them into a memory care facility and what that means and what that looks like, But then also other things that are going on in the end of life realm, psychedelics at the end of life. That's a really big movement right now. I personally don't really know much about it. It's not my realm. I've not been able to do much with it. It's not legal here, but Christine Caldwell, she knows all about that stuff. That's her thing. So she does a little bit about it in Death Doula School. ThanaCare, if you know about ThanaCare, they're a platform that death doulas can use to help their clients document their advanced care directives. So Sam from ThanaCare does a whole lesson about how death doulas can use ThanaCare to help their clients. Micah from Return Home does a little lesson about what human composting is, so that death doulas understand human composting, because this is a question that could come up. And if you're a death doula, I think you should be able to answer that question with your clients. Medical aid in dying. Death doulas need to know what medical aid in dying is. But I live in Ohio. Medical aid in dying is not legal here. So, I know as much as I've researched, but I've never used medical aid in dying with a client. So I have Dr. Bob Uslander from Empowered Endings over in California. He does a whole lesson about medical aid in dying. So there's all of these other leaders in the end of life realm that do lessons within Death Doula School. So you're getting a ton of education, not only from me, who's, obviously got all of this education to give, but also from all of these other leaders in the end of life realm, so that by the time you finish and you graduate, you are very well educated in everything going on. But also, I think that it's important for death doulas to understand that in order to be a death doula, you have to run a business. And without business training, death doulas need business training in order to be able to be a successful death doula. So my school also includes a lot of business training too, because I want death doulas to be successful.
Yeah. So I think people forget that part, that if you're working as a doula, you're basically starting a small business. You're not going to be working in a hospital with a big organization. That's a safety net that you're not going to have. You're going to be on your own. So the business piece of it is a good part of Death Doula School. Very needed. I love the comprehensive nature of what you're teaching, the different disciplines and the different connections. So important. So how can my listeners connect with you, access the Death Doula School, or join the Death Doula Collective if they're already a doula and looking to connect with others?
Yeah, so I am all over social media. So if you look up Death Doula Kacie, Kacie, on any social media, I have Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Pinterest, YouTube, like literally anywhere you'll find me. LinkedIn, you can find me there. And I have links in my bio. You can shoot me a DM. You can message me. You can comment. You can do anything. You can find me there. Also, deathdoulakacie.com is a great way to find information. You can email me, Kacie@deathdoulakacie. I'm really easy to find. You can Google Death Doula Kacie and you'll find me there too. You can Google Death Doula School and you'll find me there. So it's pretty easy to find me, but don't hesitate to reach out if you have any questions. I'm really accessible, and I don't mind, personally answering any questions that anybody has. So please don't hesitate to reach out.
Well, I will have links in the show notes to all your socials, your website, including I'll have your email there as well so people can find you. Kacie, it was so great having you on the show. I love talking with doulas who are also nurses. It's so heartening to hear somebody doing good work, and you seem to be one of those people. And thank you for that.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. And I, of course, love and advocate for everything hospice all the time. And I appreciate you.
Thanks for listening to the Heart of Hospice podcast. Check out our sponsor in the show notes and please leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. We would appreciate it if you would share this episode with your friends and family and anyone who needs to know more about hospice. Connect with us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And remember, no matter who you are or where you are in your hospice journey, you are the heart of hospice.
This is the Whole Care Network. Helping you tell your story one podcast at a time.